Welcome back. Well, we are focusing on that Transparency International's reports on the corruption index, where Nigeria ranked not too good. Well, we're heading to Abuja. We've got Garba Shehu, who is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. We also do have Honorable Dachum Bagos, who is a member of the Anti-Corruption Committee and also a member of the Financial Crimes Committee in the House of Representatives. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. Well, Mr. Shehu, let me start with you. It's not good news for the country. Particularly, the government has one of the legs of the thrust of the government, which is fighting corruption. Now, this assessment really says a lot more work needs to be done.
I think
Can you hear me?
There's a problem with the...
Well, regarding this assessment now, where it says, look, we're not doing as good as the government portrays, how are you taking this report? Or how is the government taking this report?
Well, you know that the report itself is of perception index. So perception is what it is, perception. Certainly, it's different from reality that you have on the ground. The report is harsh on the government. It does not take due cognizance of the ground reality. In fairness to the TI that presented the report, they said themselves that it is not research-based. So it is not fact-based report, but based on secondary data, information collected here and there. In effect, anybody could put together this kind of report from press releases issued by opposition political party and just... I think that on the overall, the facts on the ground contradict this report. This administration has done enormously well. We have achieved quite a lot, and certainly it doesn't speak to the facts on the ground.
So if you say that you think this is not research-based, let me just give you an insight into the methodology that was used for this index. Now, according to TI, they say 13 data sources were used to construct the corruption perception index for the year 2019. And 13 of them, but I'll give you just a few, just to help you understand what went into this particular research, as it were. So we have one, the African Development Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment. That's the African Development Bank, the AFDB. Another one is the World Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment. The World Economic Forum's Executive Opinion Survey 2019 was also used, and that's just 3 of 13. Another one which was used was a World Justice Project Rule of Law Index. This one focused on the judiciary. I could go on until I get to 13. So, I mean, looking at this, would you still say you think it's not research-based?
Yeah, because they, and I'm happy, as I said, they haven't said that they undertaken a research of their own. So there are bits on pieces of information they had picked here and there. Look at what the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime did on corruption in Nigeria. The report they released before the close of last year. They interviewed 33,000 respondents across Nigeria. And they can defend that data wherever they go because they own it. In the case of TI, no, it's hearsay. Somebody said something and we're picking it from there. That is the difference it makes.
Saying that African Development Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment is hearsay? Or are you saying that the World Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment is also hearsay? I could give you the questions that were asked, and they didn't just ask random individuals. They asked professionals, members of the academia in Nigeria. So is that hearsay?
TI said in that report that did not undertake original research of their own. They are reporting on the basis of what they heard from other people. That's basically a fact. It's in their report.
Given you the research they relied on, I've given you the AFDBs, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, and others. So are you still saying that those organizations that conducted this research didn't conduct it well, or you can't rely on them? Seeing the relationship we have, not just with the AFDB, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, is that what you're saying?
Taken to task, all of these groups I mentioned, taken to task, each one of them, can they speak for TI? So TI cannot speak for them. TI, if they want to be taken seriously, they should engage in their own research. I have mentioned to you the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So they went out there in the field, they collected primary data of their own. So taken to court, taken to task, they can defend this. TI cannot defend these facts. They cannot defend what some others had given, secondary data that they are relying to assess Nigeria.
All right, let's take the opinion of Honorable Dachong Bagos on this conversation that we're having. First of all, how do you react to the report by TI?
Yeah. Well, as a Nigerian, it's quite unfortunate that that as a citizen of this country, I will have a report coming out of the country saying that we're not doing well in terms of fighting corruption and in terms of transparency, accountability. So as a Nigerian, every Nigerian is supposed to feel bad on this certain issue. And that takes us to the reason. We should be able to look at what are those reasons that this has brought us, given the rating of which we are now. And that's why I will differ with my brother, Garba Shehu, in the sense that it's not about us complaining, because the same Transparency International, which gave its rating about Nigeria 2 years ago, the same administration celebrated the report. So if the same TI is saying that, look, 2 years down the line, we did not do well, we shouldn't castigate or look down on their report, but we should take the report seriously. If we are not taking Transparency International report seriously, we won't be here talking about it. We will just rubbish it the dustbin. But this is something that I think all over the world, Transparency International is taken seriously. So it is an issue that across party lines, across religious lines, across ethnic lines, let's come to the table and look at what I do. Why are we at this level now instead of the blaming game? Because when you look at the reasons, when you start looking at the reasons why Nigeria has been rated at this level, you should be able to know that actually we have a problem that has to do with transparency and accountability. The issue there is that, look, who is in charge of fighting corruption, who is in charge of issue of transparency, who then, because when you talk of fighting corruption, yes, there are agencies that are in charge of fighting corruption. When you talk of transparency, you know that there's someone that needs to give and to be transparent about it. When you talk of accountability, you know that someone needs to be accountable on some certain issues. We shouldn't look at issues that have to do with fighting corruption in the media. We shouldn't look at issues that have to do with fighting corruption by arrest or conviction. No. What are the major issues? When you look at the perception of Transparency International, to me, I believe in it because it is the fact that it's perception, yes, but there are issues that have led to that. When they talked about bribery, they talked about nepotism, they talked about, when you took out why are Nigerians involved in bribery, why are Nigerians so much involved in nepotism, and so on and so forth, because we don't yet have strong institutions that will be able to look at, to address such issues. Every country in this world has tendencies of corrupt issues, but then the system and strong institutions are issues that address these things generally. Nepotism, why nepotism? Because high level of unemployment. Everybody is looking at now. Garba Shehu can even attest to the fact that he have a lot of demands on him that have to do that, looking for employment left, right, center. When we address a lot of issues as a country, corruption naturally will go down. But unfortunately, year in, year out, administration in, administration out. We talk about corruption. We look at it. This government blame the other one blame the other one. It's not an issue of blaming game. Let's really take some of these issues seriously. If 2 years down the line, Transparency International report was celebrated by this administration, now, again, Transparency International is saying that, look, we did not do well as a country. I expect that the present administration should go back to the drawing board. What are those reasons and what are those issues that we have not done well as a country? Look at legislations that have to do with fighting corruption. Look at the operatives that have to do with fighting corruption. What are those methods that we are taking? These are issues that I believe that if we take as a country, we'll be able to address the issues. But blaming game, I don't think that we should be involved in blaming game now. I will advise the present administration, let's look at the core issues that have made Nigeria to be at the level we are now. Address the issue of unemployment.
Honorable Bagos.
Address the issue of a lot of issues.
We'll come back to some of the things that your committee has been doing about that. But let me take that same question, that comment to Mr. Shehu right now. So the federal government celebrated that report, as you heard him say previously. But now you're saying that that same report is not valid? How do you react to that?
The report, as we have, ignore major strides that have been choked, that have been achieved by this administration. Under President Muhammadu Buhari, this country has abolished grand corruption. In this country today, it's no longer possible for you to remove $16 billion from the treasury on the basis that you will provide power and you don't provide that power. It's no longer possible for you to remove $2 billion from the treasury to say you will buy weapons for the armed forces. And then you just share it to marabouts.
One moment, Mr. Shehu. One moment, Mr. Shehu. The question is, government celebrated this report when TI said 2 years ago that thumbs up, you're doing great. Corruption levels is dropping. Federal government is tackling the issue well. Now the same report, the same organization is saying you have dropped the ball. How do you react to the two? Don't you think it's good to at least consider, from what Mr. Bagos said, Honorable Bagos said as well, look at areas in which we may have dropped the ball?
He's absolutely in order because the reports are not the same. The report of 2 years ago is not the same as this one. What I'm telling you is that this report ignored the fact that EFCC alone had achieved high-profile convictions never seen before in this country. More than 1,000 convictions
in 1 year. It's the same organization. It's the same organization.
Nearly $1 trillion in recoveries.
It's the same organization, Mr. Shehu. It's the same organization that produced the report of 2 years ago that's assessing our corruption fight, even now. So, doesn't it deserve some?
Yeah. So what is wrong? What is wrong in examining what is wrong in going to examine the methodology? As a matter of fact, I'm aware that the leaders of one of the leading agencies in the country, PACAC, the Presidential Advisory Committee on Against Corruption, actually went all the way to the UK and sat down with Transparency International, disagreed with them on their methodology, and told them that if you have to be taken seriously by anyone in this country, go into research, serious research. So nothing is lost by the fact that we are questioning methodology that you disagree with.
There's an angle to this one. There's a global corruption barometer report of 2019 that also says that in 2015 in Nigeria, has corruption level changed in the previous 12 months? In 2015, 43% of the people asked said overall bribery dropped. But in 2019, 44%. that should, and that's just one of several questions that have been asked in this report. So maybe, perhaps it is time for government to maybe dissipate the information so that more people can be involved in the corruption fight, not just agencies of government. Perhaps that's one of the things that's wrong. What do you think?
Well, let me say that I hope that nothing I say here, nothing anybody in government is saying, that the war against corruption is a finished business. Nobody would make that claim. It's an ongoing process, it's an ongoing war. However, what we want everyone to understand is that we have made enormous gains, first of all, dealing with grand corruption. Most largely, or in fact, abolished completely. There is administrative corruption in the country that had existed for all the time in the country. Now, what are you doing about that? We are making efforts reducing all of that. And the data we have, credible as we know it, is saying that, look at the police, look at the customs, look at the licensing agency, look at the land office. We haven't abolished it, but these things are climbing down. And we'll appreciate if data presented by anyone, TI or anyone, reflects the ground reality.
Federal government also producing reports that can be accessed by anyone about the fight against corruption.
Sorry, you have to repeat the...
Is the federal government also generating its own reports that can be referenced by any of these institutions or agencies all over the place?
Yeah, I believe all of these agencies, because they are accountable, if they don't do it through press conferences, they go before the parliament and they ask questions and they render account on what they do. So yes, much of what is happening is out there in the public domain. But do people believe all, you know, it's always said that the one who is pretending to be asleep is harder to wake than the one who is actually asleep. So those who are determined not to believe this administration on account of what it is doing on all of these things, they will not change their mind, no matter the deluge of facts poured onto them and given to them.
All right, we've since been joined by Auwal Rafsanjani, who is the head of Transparency International Nigeria. Thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, Mr. Shehu earlier did say that, first of all, much as you say that your report is 100% accurate and reliable and factual, he says, you yourself say, you didn't generate this data primarily. You relied on secondary data. To that extent, he thinks that this report cannot be relied upon. It cannot be 100%, as you say it is.
Thank you very much. Let me first and foremost say that I want to correct some wrong impression. One, this report is a perception on public sector in Nigeria. Secondly, this report, whether this report or not this report, you did not actually need Transparency International to tell you that Nigerians perceive that they encounter instances of corruption in Nigeria, unless you want to perpetually want to live in denial in this country. Even government itself has been arresting people, you know, both in different places who have committed corrupt practices. So you don't even need Transparency International to tell you that there's a corruption in the security sector. There's a corruption, even in the judiciary. That is the reason why even the president has to sack the Chief Justice of the Federation because of some element of corruption. Unless they are telling us that all those things are not anything to do with corruption. Thirdly, I think it is need to understand what constitutes corruption. Corruption is not just about giving money. There's a political corruption. When there's a political corruption, the integrity of the electoral system is also called to question. When there's a huge vote buying, when there's disregard of laws and policies that has to do with the fight against corruption. For example, the Freedom of Information law is being terribly disregarded by various government agencies. The public procurement law is also being disregarded. the fiscal responsibility law itself is not being complied with. We have NAITI, which is Nigerian Structural Transparency Initiative. They conduct audit report to show so many agencies, so many companies not paying taxes. What is happening? The report is not being done with. So I think there's a macro understanding of what corruption is and what Transparency International is trying to do. Transparency International is not measuring, how, anti-corruption agencies are performing their anti-corruption work. We commend them, we encourage them, we actually partner with them, and we want them to succeed. But what we don't understand is how government will simply live in perpetual denial that there's no corruption, or what this report is talking about, maybe saying that the government is not doing anything. No, there are certain fundamental things that you must put in place, for you to be perceived by people either in the country or international community to see that, yes, you are actually serious about fight against corruption. So it is not about measuring what EFCC or ICPC is doing. It is not also about, coming to castigate, or undermine anybody. It is a wake-up call, and we know as Nigerians, whether with the Transparency International report or without Transparency International report, many Nigerians are suffering from extortion. The governor of Borno State just recently, mentioned it that even the security men are actually extorting victims of insurgents. And this has been reported severally. But why must we deny? I think what I will expect from any serious government, especially a government that says they want to fight corruption, is to say, okay, if there are problems, there are gaps, whether it is in the policy and legal framework, let us address it. If there are problems in terms of how people perceive things, let us do things differently. But to come and deny, Nigerians will just be laughing at you, and the whole international community will be laughing at you when even your government, you are actually arresting and continue to confiscate, assets that have been stolen by people. And so many of those things are going. Charges being dropped, on some people that are considered to be corrupt. ICPC, EFCC investigated some people, who they actually indicted them. But yet, this government had even gone ahead to appoint them, give them political appointment. How do people think that Nigerians will perceive what we are doing? We are not saying that government has not done anything. In fact, we are actually encouraging government to do more, and we are supporting government to do that. But there's no way we must continue to deny that there are problems. The whole Secretariat of Government has to be
just quickly,
because of allegation of
Mr.
corruption.
Rafsanjani, just quickly, I'd like you to also respond to the part about methodology. I mean, Mr. Shehu has faulted the methodology of this research. So, quickly, just what do you have to say about the methodology?
Every government in this country, has always faulted the methodology, because when it is convenient, it is okay. When it is not convenient, you condemn it. These, sources where Transparency International gather these, data are World Bank, African Development Bank, World Economic Forum, and many, reputable agencies like Mo Ibrahim Foundation. Today, if all these agencies, they have said that Nigeria is doing well, will my brother Shehu denounce it? He will not denounce it, he will celebrate it. But let us be realistic. We don't need all these agencies. In Nigeria, Nigerians are suffering from corruption, and the government has said that they are determined to fight corruption. What I expect government to do is really to critically review the state of corruption in Nigeria, how Nigerians are perceiving corruption. We did not need to bother about what even Transparency International is saying. We should be worried with what Nigerians are experiencing. To get admission, you have to pay bribe. To get, employment in this country, you have to pay bribe. And Garba know that very well. People have been talking about this. Judicial corruption.
Mr. Rafsanjani,
we all know this thing is happening.
We'll get more responses from all of you when we return in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Sunrise. Well, Mr. Shehu, let's quickly get your response. He did highlight a lot about how you accepted the report previously, so he just thinks that, well, if you accepted it at that point in time, he wonders on what basis then would you reject it at this point because it's still the same question about methodology when you accepted it at the time. And he also highlighted the challenges Nigerians face and experience with regard to fight against graft.
Yeah. Okay, so there's nothing contradictory, as I said, because the report cited 2 years ago is not the same as this one. If you look at this one, the thing that should worry anyone is the fact that it is pegged on blame. And I want to say that, my good friend, Honorable Dachum, had said earlier that government is engaging in blame games and all of that. So the whole thing is, if you want to engage the government to cause corruption, to defeat corruption in the country, the thing to do is work with the administration, work with the government. The idea, look, when you read the report as issued yesterday, it was pegged on two things. Nigeria has slid back 1 percentage point. Nigeria had come down from 28 to the 27th position. Yet, this is a country that has, if you go back to what the president wrote in a letter to the country, has made a commitment to the country to remove person-to-person contacts when it comes to, approvals of government processes. That government would move rapidly to digitize, including payments for, say, electricity and so on. And so therefore, when you reduce these levels of contact, this incidence of bribe seeking by officials will be much reduced. This is an administration that has put in place a policy beginning this January that every payment above 5 million naira will be put online. You will see it there. So nobody, again, I want to repeat, nobody in the government is saying that there is no corruption in this country. And please, Mr. Rafsanjani, take this to your people. Nobody is saying, no, the thing is, we are saying that efforts are ongoing. It's not a finished business. We are reducing bribe-seeking conduct. And we have evidence to show from research. Your report here just cited the UNDOC report. The revealing thing about that thing is that younger Nigerians are showing an increasing willingness to pay bribes. And that among our women in Nigeria are least susceptible to demanding bribes in offering service. Perhaps this is why the president of Nigeria, President Muhammad, has made women as his own ministers of finance all of this period of time. So we are making progress. And the thing is that to assume that it is not a finished business, there's more work to do, and it is ongoing. We are seeking to change attitudes. Education is ongoing in our schools, that young people will understand that bribe seeking is wrong. In the past in this country, corruption was not disapproved, even at a rhetorical level. That we had administration in the country that never said corruption was bad. This is a country that we have an administration that not only condemns corruption, no, is making effort, is carrying on with projects to reduce and minimize corruption. It's an ongoing effort.
So I think this conversation has largely tilted towards the fact that, yes, we can see all those figures here and there, the index, our position on them, but what is happening on ground is most times what is of major concern. And I'd like to bring in Honorable Bagos into this conversation yet again. Now, Mr. Garba Shehu referenced the UNODC report. And according to that report, 117 million bribes are paid yearly in Nigeria. And if you crunch that, that's an average of 1.1 bribe per adult in Nigeria. That shows how prevalent that issue is in the country. Yes, there's grand corruption, but then we also see this issue of smaller corruptions, in quotes, in the country. So talking about your committee in the National Assembly, what kind of conversations are you having such that, yes, grand corruption is being handled, but then 117 million bribes per year, that is huge.
Yeah, the Anti-Corruption Committee and even the Financial Crimes Committee of the House, we've sat down and looked at how we can change the narratives. The chairmen of both committees are working in synergy, even with that of the Senate. We are looking at how to change the narratives. We know, we have interacted with anti-corruption agencies, the EFCC, ICPC, Code of Conduct, and so on and so forth. And we are now looking at, look, it's not about arrest, and at the end of the day, nothing comes out. Some of us have been involved with some of the anti-corruption agencies. I can assure you, an agency like ICPC have taken public awareness as far as it could go. But we are now looking at what are those issues that, as much as you tell and you talk about the fight against corruption, as much as you talk about corruption, as much as you see arrests being made, but still, you still have other issues going on around the corner. Because if you try to block here, Nigerians still beat the system. So the Anti-Corruption Committee of the House, we are looking at a holistic arrangement. What are the causes? What are the root causes of these issues? And that's why that was what I expect that Garba Shehu should be able to be addressing. That look, government is looking at the root causes, and those are the issues that the Anti-Corruption Committee is looking at. Because as much as we talk about the people are being arrested on a daily basis, we know that, look, when it comes to fight against corruption, once you are being invited by the anti-corruption agencies, you start looking at who you know so that you would either go and see how you would talk to friends and relatives around to see that your issues are being piped down. Like Rafsan have said earlier again, issue of selective justice. These are issues that we need, as a committee, we are looking at. If we are fighting corruption, whosoever you are is not above the law. You are not above the law. And it's not about legislation. We have enough legislation in this country to fight corruption. But what we need that have to address most of these issues, a political integrity. Is there the political will? And to some of us, at a point, I looked at it at there is an individual political will. Yes, the president talks about fighting corruption, but the people in government alongside with him, are they willing to fight corruption? Are they ready to fight corruption? Because if you start checking and really addressing the issues, look at the past 6 years, there are people that before they get into government in 2015, now they are millionaires. And when you start looking at these people, left, right, center, government in, government out, we usually have part-time millionaires as a result of corrupt issues that you have in government. People just go, get money, get out, another government will come, start looking, chasing them out. Let's put the system in place that whether whatsoever government that comes in is just like putting in, going into the computer, whatsoever you get there, that is what comes out. So let's look at the system and look at the political integrity in fighting corruption. The elections just passed. Will any party come out and say that, look, we really followed the electoral guidelines in terms of electoral process? Do we follow a lot of issues that have to do with election in this country? Even the ruling party, they know that a lot of monies exchange hands during elections. So these are issues that when we come to the table as a country, and these are issues that the Anti-Corruption Committee want to say, look, let's call a spade a spade. There is no need to hide. The more we hide, the next generation that we are talking about will not get it easy. But if we that we are in government now, we tell ourselves the truth, we should be able to address issues.
Honorable Bagos, you as well as, of course, the other panelists may be able to speak to this slide that we want to show you about Nigeria's rating on TI's corruption index. And it goes back as far as 2012 until now, and you can see the trajectory. Our position in 2012 was 139, and today we have, between 2015 and now, we have undulated between 136 and 146, and that definitely is something that should give anyone concern. And it brings my mind to the fact that we've had some policies introduced over the years to fight corruption. How effective have these policies been, Honorable Bagos, in fighting this corruption? You talked about the systems, but then we have policies, we have laws. There's the Money Laundering Act of 1995 that's been upgraded in 2004. There is the ICPC Act, there is the EFCC Act. How strong are the systems we have in fighting this systemic corruption that you referenced earlier?
Yeah, well, like I said, we have enough laws to be able to convict anybody. We have enough laws in this country to be able to checkmate corruption. But the issue here is the system. Like I said, the political will to close your eyes, just like the statute of the statute of the law, is that to close your eyes, no matter who it is against the law. But I can assure you, for instance, today, as a public officer, if the system wants to get any public officer with a fault, they go to code of conduct, they use they get the EFCC law, they get the ICPC law. All those laws are there. But the political will, like I said earlier again, yeah, the president is willing to fight corruption, but the people along with him in government, are they willing and are they ready? You hear side comments that, come, we are hungry. Is it corruption that is going to put food for us on the table? And once we start looking at some of these issues, what are those issues that have to do with industrialization of this country, issues that have to do with addressing unemployment, issues that have to do with addressing nepotism? Once we start addressing these issues, we'll be able to look, as long as the political class is not ready, I can assure you the issues of corruption will still be striving in this country, because we have a lot of the anti-corruption agencies will have work day in, day out. In as much as, and again, let's be able to understand, in the work that the EFCC and ICPC is doing day in, day out, that does not mean that we are fighting corruption. Like for me, if I'm taking my car to the mechanic and I see that the mechanic has a lot of cars that have not yet been fixed, I don't take my car there, because as far as I'm concerned, which means you have a lot of issues at hand and you don't have a solution to it. So the more we see media trial and people are being arrested, that is not a yardstick that we are fighting corruption.
All right,
rather,
Bagos,
people will now be afraid that, look, if we do it the way Mr. A did it, he will not be, I will be arrested. So they change, they change the method at which they perpetrate corruption.
All right.
So
let me bring in Mr. Rafsanjani on this matter. Pardon me for that. Well, part of the point, the report highlighted is, particularly the fourth one, why we are where we are today. You say that fourth one references poor understanding of what corruption is and how to tackle it. Now, that may be taken for granted because, look, if we don't understand it and how to approach it, that definitely will be a problem. So your findings, has it always been the case over time? Because herein, you did directly reference the authorities that they have a poor understanding of what it is and how to tackle it. Tell us about that.
Yes, I am saying this in respect to the fact that we are receiving or we are hearing denial from people that would have actually said, look, let us look at where we are not doing well. Let us see how we can, strengthen our partnership. Because to fight corruption, you have to understand that you cannot do it alone. You need the people. You need the relevant groups that, are actually working day and night to support the government effort to fight corruption. And if there are concerns, what I expect is government to say, look, because we say that we want to fight corruption or we are fighting corruption, let us genuinely look at the reality on the ground. What is it that is absent in the way we are doing? What is it that we can do better? And there are quite a number of issues. So if the government now come to just dismiss that there's no, this is not even talking about reality. We are talking about perception. I want the people in government to always understand this is public perception. we are not, Transparency International is not saying that this is absolutely reality. It is a perception, how Nigerians and, people who come to do business in Nigeria, how they receive or how they see things in the country. So it is what I thought, they did not understand. There's a missing point, Secondly, as Nigerians, like I said earlier on, you do not need international organization, UNDP or UNODC or Transparency International to tell you that we have issues that has to do with corruption, in this country. And that is why even the government itself had continued to talk about this and bringing all these issues. So instead of denying it, let us just have an open mind to have conversation, genuine discussion around the issues of judicial reform, around the issue of electoral reform, around the issues of political party reform, around the issue of also looking at, even how we can implement the national strategy on the fight against corruption. Let us also look at those areas where there is, leakages in our economy. We talk about petroleum industry bill. We talk about all our tax laws. Those are areas that I will expect government to say, look, let's sit down and see this in. It's not about really coming to, deny this. So that's why we think that if they are denying it, then it means that they are poor understanding of what corruption is, especially the political corruption. Because if you are now sitting here to say that the electoral system is okay, where we see clear vote buying across party line, where we see absolute manipulation in the electoral system, then something is wrong. And where you also have clear, corruption in the procurement, especially even in the defense procurement, which even the government itself had actually used that to nail the other government, that has gone. And this corruption in the defense sector is still ongoing. So that is why we thought that maybe the government did not understand what Nigerians are going through when it comes to corruption. Because the extortion that is going on, even on the road, as a result of which many people lost their life because they are not able to pay, the bribe to pass, many motorists, they have been killed. Many people passing, they have been, dealt with, and many people are not able to access justice in our, judiciary. Even the government itself had to arrest so many judges, had to even send away the whole team of, justice of the Federation because of this whole corruption thing. So, but for now, to come and say all these things is not, an issue, and you just want to be applauded that everything is going very well, I think then we need to understand that something is wrong. America, in this report that we issue, America has gone down. United Kingdom has gone down. France has gone down. Canada has gone down. None of these countries come to rubbish the report, but they are taking measures to address gaps. So for a government that is actually working or that is having anti-corruption at its major cardinal issue, what I expect them to do is not to do this dismissal. The meeting that Garba referred to, that the Parker met, in London, I facilitated that meeting. It was not even with the Transparency International Secretariat. It was with one of our, chapters, just like we have in Nigeria, UK. I facilitated that meeting, and they met. Of course, government will always agree, to disagree that the methodology is not okay. But do you need obeying those methodologies to know that we have these problems? Like I said, these are things that we suffer every now and then. Corruption in our university, corruption in the hospital, corruption in the health sector, name it, all these public sector are all suffering from corruption. So rather than just dismissing this thing so that you don't even anger Nigerians, because the more you talk about this, the more you provoke Nigerians. Nigerians will not be happy to hear that, you are giving a clean bill,
all right.
And like I said, this is not really measuring the performance of the EFCC or ICPC. They are doing fantastic work, and we have been supporting them. And even they themselves, they have not been given the necessary support. For example, all of them that are working, they are putting their life. They don't have life insurance. They are risking their life. So there's so much that needs to be done. So
all right. Now, Mr. Rafsanjani, just a moment. I mean, I take it those issues you have raised, which we hope will be dealt with. But speaking of what government will do with this report, Mr. Shehu, I'm just curious. Now, Transparency International raised a few issues, talked about selective adherence to the rule of law and corruption in political parties. Remember, they talked about political money, also talked about selecting which case to prosecute and which not to prosecute, as well as other issues. I'm just curious, what will the government do with this report? Are you looking away from it, or would you be taking some of the recommendations and issues which were raised in this report?
I think that in all of these things, we need the right environment in which to engage. My good friend Rafsanjani is talking about other countries, USA, Canada, UK, coming down in their own ranking. And I'm sure if you go to those countries, the way and the manner the report is being presented is not in a way to put down governments. No, the idea is to engage and say these are things that you have fallen short of and you need to make correction upon. So, but the thing is that you don't make any ego thing, one-upmanship. It doesn't work that way. That's my own attitude. And he himself said his report is not even about reality. Yes, it is, and we have said it earlier. He said it is perception, it's not reality. But this is your own country as well. So if that perception out there is wrong, what are you doing to help, what are you doing to change it? Instead of you're fueling it. Because you know that yourself, that your report is on the basis of perception, not reality. You have just said it now. And for my good friend, Honorable Dachum, again, he said 2 times.
Are you saying that the perception of Nigerians is not the reality?
That's what Rafsanjani said. You can rewind your tape and listen to that.
Yeah, no. Is that what you are now saying?
The Honorable Dachum.
Let's allow him clear the air then. Let's allow him clear the air on what he said.
I said that our report, on the basis of the perception of Nigerians about how corruption happens in public sector, Now, the Transparency International is not coming to tell you that, this is, how it is, that, it's 100% what has happened. But we, as Nigerians, we know that that perception is actually reality because we experience this corruption in police, in the security sector, we experience it in education, we experience it in health sector, we experience it everywhere. Admission, to get even confirmation, of appointment on any government issue, even passport, even ordinary passport to get, you have to pay a bribe. So all those things, when business community come, or when
we're here, Mr. Rafsanjani. We're winding down now, and I need to ask Mr. Shehu before we go to Honorable Bagos. Mr. Shehu, is the government in any way looking forward, or will they consider having some sort of direct measurement with Nigerians to actually feel the pulse of Nigerians about the government's fight against corruption? Is this something the government will consider?
It is absolutely in order and it is ongoing. As I said, we have tremendous respect for the UN ODC report, which I have quoted from, which you have reported upon. And it didn't just say blame, blame, blame. It also said these are elements that are good and you are doing well. And please permit me to clear, before you go on to Honorable Dachum, this issue I come from the media myself. And I want to believe, and I'm convinced that media of exposure of criminality, of crime, of corruption is a deterrent. And I tell you that for many families, that fear of exposure is in fact a far more important deterrence than even the 1 year or 6 months of jail term or recovery of assets that take place. You steal 5 billion naira and they send you to 1 year in, and then you come out, you enjoy your money. That blemish, they put your picture on the front page of the newspaper, your son and yourself standing trial for stealing money, and you think that is a delight? No, it's a deterrent, and it works for this country.
Right. Honorable Bagos, a quick one now. Do you think that your committee, and by extension the National Assembly, will have the moral ground to do anything regarding stemming the tide, particularly when this report also speaks largely about institutionalized corruption among political parties, and members of the assembly are members of political parties.
Yeah, they will make, I want to believe that incremental progress.
Sorry, Mr. Garba, it's actually for Honorable Bagos.
It will not go.
Sorry, Mr. Shehu, it's for Honorable Bagos, just before we go. Honorable Bagos, that's for you.
With
Garba Shehu really trying to address a lot of issues. But I can assure, like I said earlier, the Anti-Corruption Committee of the House is really going to engage all stakeholders in addressing the issues of corruption. Like I said again, we have engaged the anti-corruption agencies in these issues. And in fairness, some of us have been involved with anti-corruption agencies. And we know that when it comes to anti-corruption awareness, they have been doing that. But one thing again that the committee will really want to see in the next coming years is that what is really the anti-corruption strategy of this country to ensure that every state, every local government has a strategy in fighting corruption and to be able to help them to execute their political will.
I'm afraid we'll have to let it go at that point. Honorable Dachun Bagos, we'll have to let it go at that point. Honorable Bagos is a member of the Anti-Corruption Committee and a member of the Financial Crimes Committee in the House of Representatives. He's a member of the People's Democratic Party as well. And we also do have Mr. Auwal Rafsanjani, who is the head of Transparency International, Nigeria. And then Mr. Garba Shehu, who is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. Gentlemen, thank you all for coming on this morning. We will be back in a moment. Don't go away.